The most valuable thing I ever found would be a painting by Jack Wilkinson Smith that I sold for $155,000.
For years, Dave Hester built a career finding hidden treasure inside abandoned storage units. To viewers, he seemed like the man who had everything figured out financially. But behind the auctions and television fame, a very different story was unfolding. A sudden medical emergency nearly ended his career overnight. A bitter lawsuit against his own show spiraled into a costly legal fight. Businesses he once relied on quietly disappeared. And today, the man once called the Mogul is facing a heartbreaking reality few fans ever expected. The man behind the Mogul persona. Before financial troubles and legal battles began to surround Dave Hester, he was known for something very different. For years, he was one of the most recognizable faces on the reality television series Storage Wars. Viewers knew him by a single nickname, the Mogul. It was a name that suggested power, wealth, and confidence. And on screen, Hester leaned into that image completely. The show itself focused on a simple but unpredictable business. Professional buyers would bid on abandoned storage units that had been locked by their owners for months. Because the contents were hidden, every purchase carried risk. A unit might contain worthless clutter, or it might contain rare antiques worth thousands of dollars. The tension came from the gamble. Within that environment, Hester quickly developed a reputation. His style was aggressive and direct. While other buyers hesitated, he often jumped into bidding wars without showing any fear of the price climbing higher. He studied the units carefully, looking for small clues that others might miss. A glimpse of furniture, a toolbox, or even the way boxes were stacked could hint at what might be hidden inside. But it was not just his instincts that made him famous. Hester also played a clear role in the show's dynamic. Many viewers saw him as the villain of the series. He argued openly with other buyers and did not hide his frustration when he believed someone was interfering with his business. Those confrontations became part of the entertainment. They also helped create the larger-than-life persona that surrounded him. The nickname, the Mogul, fit that image perfectly. Hester presented himself as a veteran of the storage auction world, someone who had been doing the job long before the cameras arrived. In reality, that was the truth. Long before Storage Wars became a hit, Hester had already spent decades working in auctions. By the time the show began filming, he had more than 25 years of experience buying and selling items through storage sales and auctions. That background gave him credibility with viewers. And as the show's popularity grew, so did the money involved. Reality television can be extremely profitable for its biggest personalities, and Hester benefited from that success during the peak years of the program. At the height of the show's popularity in the early 2010s, his earnings per episode reportedly reached about $25,000. During the 2013 season, Storage Wars produced roughly 26 episodes. That meant Hester's total earnings from the show alone for that year were estimated at around $650,000. For a business built around buying abandoned storage units, the income was remarkable. Those television payments were only part of the picture. Hester also continued operating his auction business while the show aired. Between television income, auction work, and merchandise tied to the show, some estimates placed his annual income during peak years at more than $500,000. Other estimates suggested that the combined income from television and business ventures could reach around $500,000 per year. The image of the Mogul was also reinforced by stories of his profitable discoveries. One of the most famous examples happened in 2012. During an auction purchase, Hester acquired a painting created by artist Jack Wilkinson Smith. The painting reportedly cost him only $750, and after further research and authentication, The artwork was sold for around $155,000. Stories like that helped build the legend surrounding him. They suggested that Hester's confidence at auctions was not just an act for television. Outside the show, Hester also tried to expand his business identity. One of his main ventures became an auction company known as Dave Hester Auctions. The company focused on both online and traditional auction events, allowing collectors and buyers to bid on items ranging from antiques to household goods. He also built a small merchandise brand around his television persona. Clothing and promotional items were sold under a label called The Mogul's Way. The brand leaned heavily on the catchphrases and personality that viewers recognized from television. The lifestyle that surrounded that brand appeared comfortable. Hester has long lived in Westminster, a community in Southern California not far from the region where many of the show's storage auctions took place. His home there has been valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars in recent years, with some estimates placing the property above $800,000. Other reports suggest that properties connected to him in California could be worth closer to $1.5 million, though the Westminster residence is the most clearly documented. On the surface, Hester looked completely successful. He had a successful television personality with decades of experience in auctions, a recognizable brand, steady business activity, and a reputation for turning forgotten storage units into profitable discoveries. But public appearances can hide a more complicated reality, because despite the popularity of Storage Wars and the income it once produced, Hester's financial growth has not followed the path many viewers expected. His wealth has not expanded in the way it should have, and in fact, many estimates of his net worth have remained surprisingly stagnant for years. For someone known on national television as the Mogul, why exactly did his fortune stop growing? The answer to that question is tied to a series of devastating losses that Hester has faced. And the first major loss that began changing his life was not even financial. The loss of his health. For years, Dave Hester looked like someone who never slowed down. His job looked exciting, but it was also stressful and filled with long days, constant travel, and the pressure of running a business all at once. For a long time, Hester seemed able to handle it. But in November 2018, something happened that changed everything. One night, Hester woke up suddenly feeling very sick. He was struggling to breathe and knew something was wrong. The symptoms were serious enough that his girlfriend rushed him to a hospital in Newport Beach, where doctors began treating him immediately. But what they discovered was frightening. Hester had suffered a hemorrhagic stroke. This happens when a blood vessel in the brain breaks and starts bleeding. It is one of the most dangerous types of strokes and often requires emergency care. So, doctors moved quickly to stabilize him. For days, Hester remained in the intensive care unit. The man who was known for shouting bids and controlling auctions was suddenly lying in a hospital bed, surrounded by doctors and machines. But the doctors still needed to understand why it happened. After a series of medical tests, they discovered that two serious health problems had been working together in the background for years. The first problem was sleep apnea. This is a condition that causes a person's breathing to stop and start repeatedly during sleep. In Hester's case, the tests showed something alarming. While he was sleeping, his breathing stopped more than 100 times every single hour. That meant his body was losing oxygen again and again throughout the night. Over time, that lack of oxygen can put enormous pressure on the body, especially on the heart and brain. The second problem was high blood pressure. High blood pressure already puts stress on blood vessels. When it is combined with severe sleep apnea, the danger becomes much greater. The repeated loss of oxygen and the pressure in the blood vessels created the perfect conditions for a hemorrhagic stroke to occur. Doctors explained that these two factors together were the likely cause of what happened. The diagnosis was a wake-up call, but surviving the stroke was only the first step. The recovery process was just beginning. After spending several days in intensive care, Hester was eventually stable enough to leave the ICU. However, he was not ready to go home. Instead, doctors transferred him to a live-in rehabilitation facility where he could begin the slow process of recovery. He stayed there for about 1 month. For someone who had spent his life moving quickly, the experience was humbling. At one point, he had to learn how to walk again. Rehabilitation after a stroke can involve many small steps. Patients often need to rebuild strength, balance, and coordination. Simple actions that most people never think about suddenly become difficult. Even basic tasks like taking a shower can require help and practice. For Hester, the reality was hard to accept. Only a short time earlier, he had been traveling to auctions, filming television episodes, and running his businesses. Now he was spending his days in therapy sessions, working with medical staff to regain normal movement. Even after leaving the rehabilitation facility, Hester continued working with doctors and specialists. Neurologists monitored his progress, and he followed medical advice to improve his health. But the effects of the stroke did not disappear quickly. By September 2019, nearly a year after the incident, Hester spoke publicly about his condition in an interview with TMZ. During that conversation, he admitted that he was still not fully recovered. He was improving, but the recovery process was slow. Unfortunately, the stroke also had another serious consequence. It affected his career. While he focused on healing, Hester stepped away from filming new episodes of Storage Wars. His absence lasted through several seasons of the show. This means that the stroke did not just affect his health, it also cost him work, screen time, income, and distance from the show that had made him famous. But before this major loss, Hester faced another loss that would take place not in a hospital, but in court. And that legal fight would become one of the most controversial chapters in the history of Storage Wars. The legal loss. By 2012, Dave Hester was one of the most recognizable faces on Storage Wars. But behind the scenes, his relationship with the producers and the network was beginning to break down. And that conflict eventually turned into a big legal battle. In December 2012, Hester filed a lawsuit against A&E Television Networks and the production company Original Productions. He was represented by well-known celebrity attorney Marty Singer, a lawyer famous for handling high-profile entertainment cases. The lawsuit asked for $750,000 in damages and legal fees related to what Hester described as wrongful termination. The lawsuit immediately attracted attention because of the claims Hester made about the show itself. At the center of his complaint was a serious accusation. Hester argued that Storage Wars was not fully authentic. In legal filings, he described the program as a staged fraud on the public. According to him, the dramatic discoveries that viewers watched each week were sometimes manipulated by the production team. One of the most controversial claims involved a practice known as salting. Hester alleged that producers occasionally planted valuable or unusual items inside storage units before filming auctions. The goal, he claimed, was to guarantee that a buyer would discover something exciting on camera. In some cases, he said, entire units were prepared in advance. According to the lawsuit, producers allegedly worked with storage facility owners to stage units that would create better television moments once they were opened. Hester also claimed the bidding itself was sometimes manipulated. In his filings, he alleged that producers occasionally paid for units on behalf of certain cast members who did not have enough money to compete with the more experienced buyers. By doing this, he argued, the show could keep weaker personalities involved in the action. One of the most specific examples mentioned in the legal documents involved items connected to Elvis Presley. Hester claimed that a collection of Presley-related newspapers worth roughly $90,000 had been planted in a storage locker for dramatic effect. The lawsuit included several other claims as well. Hester alleged that producers had paid for cosmetic surgery for a female cast member in order to make the show more visually appealing. He also argued that many of the cast interviews were scripted and that some auction scenes were staged or influenced by production staff. These accusations painted a very different picture of a show that had been marketed as a raw and unpredictable look at real storage auctions. But the tension between Hester and the network had actually started months earlier. On September 6, 2012, Hester and several other cast members reportedly met with executives from the network to discuss concerns about the alleged salting of storage lockers. But the meeting did not resolve the issue. Less than 2 weeks later, on September 18th, Hester's attorney sent a formal letter to the producers. The letter asked that the show indemnify Hester against any third-party claims that might arise if the authenticity of the auctions were questioned. In simple terms, he wanted legal protection in case someone accused him of participating in a staged process. The response from the producers came quickly. On October 1st, 2012, Hester received a letter informing him that the network would not exercise his contract option for the next production cycle, which was effectively Season 4 of the show. According to the letter, the decision was tied to the indemnity request made by his attorney. Hester believed the move was retaliation for raising concerns about the alleged staging practices. That belief became the foundation of his wrongful termination claim. The case soon moved into the courts. In March 2013, the first major ruling came from Michael Johnson, a judge in the Los Angeles Superior Court. The defendants filed what is known as an anti-slap motion. This legal strategy argues that a lawsuit is attempting to restrict free speech protected under the First Amendment. The network's legal team argued that storage wars should be considered an expressive work, similar to other forms of entertainment programming. Because of that classification, they said, the show's creative decisions were protected speech. Judge Johnson agreed with part of that argument. He dismissed Hester's unfair business practices claim, ruling that the law applied to commercial speech such as advertising, not to television programming. However, he allowed the wrongful termination claim to continue, though he said it would need to be supported with more specific evidence. The ruling was only a partial victory for the network, but it still created a major setback for Hester. The financial consequences appeared a few months later. In July 2013, a judge ordered Hester to pay a portion of the defendant's legal costs. The total fees requested by the defense teams were significant. Lawyers for the network billed about $138,000, while attorneys for original productions requested another $43,000. The judge reviewed those numbers and decided to reduce them because of what he described as overlap and duplication among the many lawyers involved in the case. After the reductions, Hester was ordered to pay $122,000 toward those legal expenses. It was an ironic outcome. The man who had filed the lawsuit against the network was now required to help pay the network's legal bills. Court records showed that defense attorneys alone spent more than 350 hours preparing the anti-slap motion. In total, 11 attorneys and 4 paralegals worked on the case for the defense side. The legal fight continued for more than a year. Finally, on July 11, 2014, the dispute came to an end. Hester and the network reached a settlement agreement outside the courtroom. The exact terms of that settlement were never made public, and the amount of money involved was not disclosed. What was clear, however, was the overall outcome. Hester did not receive the $750,000 he had originally sought in damages. Instead, the case ended quietly through settlement. While the main lawsuit was unfolding, Hester was also involved in a smaller legal dispute over his famous catchphrase. In 2012, he filed a case against R&B singer Trey Songz regarding the word "yoop." Hester had attempted to trademark the phrase, which had become a signature part of his auction persona. Songz responded with a cease and desist letter, arguing that he had been using a similar phrase in music and merchandise since 2009. During the dispute, Hester's legal team argued that the singer's version sounded more like an animal-style squeal and was different from Hester's guttural auction call. Eventually, the two sides reached an agreement under undisclosed terms, and Hester ultimately became the trademark holder for the phrase. These lawsuits brought Hester publicity, controversy, and major legal costs. It was another major loss in a career that had once seemed unstoppable. And soon, the problems would spread beyond the courtroom, into the very businesses that had once helped build the image of the Mogul. The loss of his businesses. Long before television cameras followed him through storage auctions, Dave Hester had already built a small business empire around buying and selling secondhand goods. By the mid-2000s, Hester was running retail stores that sold the kinds of items he found at auctions. One of the most well-known was a thrift shop called Rags to Riches. The store opened in 2005 in Costa Mesa. Before Hester took it over, the building had been a furniture store. He transformed it into a thrift showroom where he could sell everything from antique furniture to household items. The location was large. The showroom covered about 10,000 square feet, giving him space to display the unusual items he discovered during auctions. The inventory inside the store often came directly from storage lockers he had purchased, the same kind of units viewers would later see on television. The store became a physical version of the auction world Hester knew so well. Customers could walk through aisles filled with furniture, collectibles, and strange discoveries that had once been hidden inside abandoned storage units. At the same time, he expanded into a second location. That store was called Newport Consignment Gallery, and it operated on Newport Boulevard in California. It worked alongside Rags to Riches as another place where Hester could sell items he had acquired through auctions. Together, the two stores created a small but visible retail presence. For a while, the model worked. Hester could buy storage units, search through them for valuable items, and then bring those discoveries directly into his stores. Instead of selling everything at auctions or through middlemen, he controlled the entire process. He owned the inventory, displayed it himself, and sold it directly to customers. This structure helped create the image of the auction expert who could turn abandoned storage units into a full business. But the system did not last forever. In June 2011, both retail stores closed. Rags to Riches shut its doors in Costa Mesa, and Newport Consignment Gallery also stopped operating. The closure surprised many people who had known Hester through the resale world. At the time, the explanation given was simple. He said he was relocating his business from Costa Mesa to the nearby city of Orange. However, the relocation never happened. Instead, the physical retail side of his business quietly disappeared. The final chapter of the Newport Consignment Gallery came a few months later. On September 17, 2011, Hester held a final auction at that location, selling off remaining inventory and closing the operation for good. Years later, he spoke briefly about the closure in an interview. In June 2015, he was asked directly whether he missed owning his thrift store now that Rags to Riches had shut down. His answer was simple and somewhat reflective. "Sometimes I miss it. Sometimes I don't." That short response hinted at the complicated reality behind the decision. With the stores gone, the structure of his business changed completely. Instead of running retail locations, Hester shifted toward a different model. Around the same time the stores closed in 2011, he launched a new venture called Dave Hester Auctions. Rather than selling items in storefronts, the company focused on organizing auctions for other people. Through this new business, Hester began working as a professional auctioneer. The services covered everything from private estates to industrial equipment sales. On the surface, it looked like a natural extension of his auction background. But financially, the change represented a significant shift. Before the closures, Hester owned the inventory he sold. When he bought a storage unit, the items inside became his property. If he discovered something valuable, the profit belonged entirely to him. After the shift to auctioneering, that structure changed. Now he was often selling goods that belonged to other people. Instead of earning money from the resale value of items, he was typically paid commissions or service fees for organizing the auctions themselves. In simple terms, he had moved from being an owner of merchandise to being a service provider. By 2015, Hester even described his situation using a phrase that surprised some fans. He said he considered himself semi-retired. When asked if he would ever open another thrift store, his answer was cautious. He did not promise that the stores would return. Without the retail locations, Hester began leaning more heavily on his television persona and brand identity. By the early 2020s, the merchandise connected to that brand was often cited as one of the primary ways he continued to earn money. Meanwhile, the network of businesses that had once surrounded him had become much smaller. For someone who once ran large storefronts filled with auction discoveries, the change is dramatic, and it raises a larger question. After the health crisis, the lawsuits, and the disappearance of his retail businesses, what does Dave Hester's financial life actually look like today? Dave Hester's current net worth. More than a decade after the peak of storage wars, the financial picture around Dave Hester looks very different from what many viewers expected. At one time, he was earning tens of thousands of dollars per episode and running multiple retail businesses. Today, the numbers tell a quieter story. One of the biggest developments in recent years came in June 2025, when Hester made a surprise return to the show. The moment was designed to be dramatic. A clip filmed by TMZ showed him standing in the crowd at an auction wearing a hat, trying to stay unnoticed. Then, at the right moment, he revealed himself and shouted his famous catchphrase, "Yoop!" the same call that had made him famous years earlier. After revealing himself, he turned toward the cameras and jokingly asked whether his old friends had missed him. The reaction from the cast made it clear that not everyone was thrilled to see him again. Several of the buyers who had continued appearing on the show had built their own reputations during the years when Hester was absent. For some of them, Hester's return felt like reopening old conflicts. Buyer Ivy Calvin reacted bluntly when he heard Hester's signature shout again. According to reports from the episode, he admitted that it was something he had hoped he would never hear again. Other cast members also showed little enthusiasm. Brandy Passante expressed her frustration in her confessional interview, reacting with a stream of angry comments about Hester's sudden reappearance. The tension quickly carried over into the auction itself. During one locker sale, bidding started at only $150. But what followed quickly turned into a competitive bidding war. Hester pushed the price higher while bidding against Renee Nizota and Brandy Passante, driving the amount far above the starting price. The locker eventually sold for $1,000. Hester won the unit, but the victory only increased the frustration among the other buyers. After the sale, he told Renee he could take the next locker and suggested Brandy could try for the one after that. She quickly reminded him that she had already won a unit and questioned why he had not simply tried to buy his own locker at a lower price, instead of forcing the bidding higher. Moments like that reminded viewers why Hester had always been seen as the show's villain. Outside the show, media coverage of the return was mixed. Some viewers were excited to see one of the original personalities return. Others felt the show had moved on without him and preferred the newer dynamic between the remaining buyers. But the bigger issue surrounding Hester was not just his return to television. It was his reputation. The legal battle he launched in 2012 against the network had left lingering tension within the Storage Wars community. The lawsuit damaged several relationships within the cast and production team, and some of those relationships never recovered. Even within his own family, the business world around Hester changed over time. Some reports have suggested that his brothers eventually entered the auction and resale business themselves, becoming competitors rather than partners. Most recent estimates place Hester's net worth somewhere between $4 million and $5 million as of 2025 and 2026. That number reflects a long career in auctions, television appearances, merchandise sales, and his auction company. While the total is significant, the truth is, his wealth has largely stayed in the same range for years. During the peak of Storage Wars around 2013, Hester reportedly earned about $650,000 annually. Today, his annual earnings are estimated at roughly $500,000. While this is not a dramatic financial collapse, the lack of growth is visible. Many reality television personalities use their fame to launch large business empires. They expand into restaurants, clothing lines, real estate ventures, and media projects. Over time, those opportunities often multiply their wealth. But for Hester, that expansion never fully happened. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.